Welcome back. We are following breaking news where the fate of the president's sweeping tariff agenda is now in the hands of the Supreme Court. Justice is hearing arguments today on a case challenging the president's International Emergency Economic Powers Act to impose many of those sweeping tariffs. The court's 3 liberal justices pressed Solicitor General John Sauer on whether the president's tariffs are infringing on Congress's authority to impose tariffs. And some of the court's conservative justices expressed skepticism as well, including Justice Neil Gorsuch, a Trump appointee, who challenged the administration over its sweeping view of executive authority.
Because you say we shouldn't be concerned because this is foreign affairs and the president has inherent authority, and so delegation off the books, more or less. And if that's true, what would prohibit Congress from just abdicating all responsibility to regulate foreign commerce, for that matter, declare war, to the president?
We don't contend that he could do that. If it did.
What's the reason to accept the notion that Congress can hand off the power to declare war to the president?
Well, we don't contend that. Again, that would
well, you do. You say it's unreviewable. There's no manageable standard, nothing to be done. And now you're, I think you, tell me if I'm wrong. You backed off that position.
Maybe that's fair to say.
Okay, all right.
That would be that would really be an abdication, not a delegation.
NBC News senior Supreme Court reporter Lawrence Hurley joins me now, along with Timothy Brightbill, an attorney specializing in international trade law and policy. Thanks to both of you for being here. Lawrence, let me start with you. So what an exchange there. You heard the folks in court actually start to laugh. It's not something you typically hear at the Supreme Court. What were your takeaways from what you heard today at the High Court? Do the justices seem to be skeptical of the government's argument here?
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely a sign that both liberal and conservative justices were pushing back on the solicitor's arguments that you heard there. And, you know, this is a court with a 6-3 conservative majority that has often backed President Trump in other cases that have come up recently. But this one is a slightly different case. It's a much closer call. And I think, you know, it's early to sort of say how it's going to come out. You know, we'll wait to see what the ruling says. But I think, you know, it's an uphill battle for the administration.
Timothy, do you agree with that assessment? Do you see it as an uphill battle for the administration? And what do you make of how the plaintiffs argued their case today in court?
I think you're correct. This is still a very close decision. The court's 3 Democratic justices will probably vote against President Trump's tariffs. And then the question is whether some of the other members of the court also have concerns about the president's use of this law. And the argument focused quite heavily on the law used by President Trump, IEEPA, and whether that law, which gives the power to the president to regulate imports, also includes the power to impose tariffs. That dominated most of the hearing. And I'll say the justices asked very difficult questions of both sides.
Lawrence, I want to play another exchange, this one with Chief Justice John Roberts. Get your reaction on the other side. Take a look.
I mean, it's been suggested that the tariffs are responsible for significant reduction in our deficit. I would say that's raising revenue domestically.
There certainly is an incidental and collateral effect of the tariffs that they do raise revenue, but it's very important that they are regulatory tariffs, not revenue-raising tariffs.
Lawrence, was there any surprise that the conservative justices seemed to question the government's argument in such a searing way?
Not particularly. I mean, this is a case where it doesn't really cut across your typical ideological lines like we've seen in some of these other contentious issues that have come up towards the court, right? There are plenty of conservatives, including conservative lawyers, conservative judges, who think that on tariffs in particular, it's both bad policy to have the tariffs, but also he doesn't have the authority to actually do it. And so this is an area where some of the conservative justices may be in sync with that thinking, and also based on sort of conservative legal thinking that predates this particular case. So I could see some of them, you know, at least some of them wanting to side with the liberal justices on this one.
Yeah. Timothy, is there a plan B in case the Supreme Court does strike down the president's tariffs? He said that this is the most important court case to go before the Supreme Court in U.S. history.
Yes, this is certainly the biggest trade case the Supreme Court has ever heard. And to answer your question, I'm sure the Trump administration does have a plan B. Tariffs are going to be a cornerstone of this administration's economic policy. And so if the court finds that the president's use of this law was improper, there are other tools in the toolbox, other laws that the president could use. Now, those laws take more time. They require investigations by the Commerce Department or the International Trade Commission or other bodies. And so it is different from using this law to impose fentanyl tariffs on China, Canada, and Mexico, and these broad reciprocal tariffs on almost all countries.
What's the broader implications for the U.S. economy, Timothy?
Well, I think we're still learning the implications. I mean, this president is very focused on the stock markets and very focused on the economy as a whole. I think we haven't seen the full impact of the hundreds of billions of dollars of tariffs that have been collected yet. It may be possible to do this without harming the economy. I think the jury is still. But the real legal question here is, did President Trump use the right tool, and did Congress delegate this power to the president?
Right now, Timothy?
I think importers are waiting to see what happens if there is a decision. Process. Right now, companies should just be planning on some form of tariffs, whether it's these or others. I mean, this administration is going to move forward, and so I think it's best for companies and industries to be prepared for that.
And Lawrence, just finally, what's the timeline that you're looking at here? When do you think the Supreme Court could make a final decision?
Yeah, so typically, the court takes quite a long time to issue written rulings, but this case is being heard on an expedited basis. And we've seen in other cases fairly recently that they can turn things around pretty quickly when they want to, especially if they already, which, is not clear in this case. But I think it's quite possible we could get a ruling before the end of this year or early next year.
All right. Lawrence, Timothy, really appreciate your insights into what happened today at the Supreme Court. Great to see both of you.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.